Hi. Okay, today we are going to discuss the third types of market structure, which is oligopoly. Now, before we start, we should know that oligopoly is considered one of the most common types of market structure in the reality. Almost 80 to 90% of the industry in the reality, they are considered oligopoly market. They are having this kind of like oligopolistic features in their market structure. Yeah. Now, before we go in depth into the specific features of oligopoly, we need to understand where for oligopoly market, they are usually having many small firms and a few big firms. So the keyword is they could be many small firms, but there are only a few big firms. And this kind of market structure usually have high barriers of entry and exit, just like monopoly. And whenever the market is having high barriers of entry and exit, new firms can hardly participate in the market. It's not like if you have capital you want to set up, then you can set up anytime. It could be due to some legal barriers, it could be due to like brand loyalty. So with a market having high barriers of entry and exit, all the firms will be earning abnormal profit, no matter short run or long run. So this is a common nature for both oligopoly and also monopoly. And now let's look at some key features for oligopoly. First of all, I mentioned where oligopoly is a market structure with a few big firms, but many small firms. So in this case, the first important features of oligopoly market is high concentration ratio. The meaning of high concentration ratio meaning to say the few big firms own collectively high amount of market shares in the total market out of the total market sales. So in which mean the market shares is concentrated on the hands of a few big firms. The supply of the market is concentrated on the hands of a few big firms. This is what we call high concentration ratio. So in the case of Malaysia, like DG, Celcom, and Maxis, collectively they own 90% or more than 90% of the market shares in the telco market. So like in US, if you talk about the media outlets, so basically 90% of the media outlets might be owned by 6 major corporations, which includes Disney, okay, we all know Disneyland, and then Time Warner, and some other firms as well. So if you look at the banking industry, in Malaysia, our banking industry will, if you look at the major market shares, might be concentrated on a few big banks, for example, like Maybank, CIMB Bank, and we do have a lot of small bank which they own very small percentage of the market share. And then if you look at the handphone, the mobile phone operating system, apparently Google Android and Apple iOS, they are capturing high percentage of market shares. Of course, Huawei Kirin is coming up as well. Okay. Then other than that, if you look at the auditing firms, most of you who are who wanted to become a standard chartered accountant, or wanted to be an auditor, then you aim to get into these 4 big auditing firms, which is like PwC, KPMG, Ernst & Young's, and also Deloitte. Okay, so in this case, we need to recognize the fact where oligopoly is very common. Okay, and secondly, another features of oligopoly is firms in oligopoly, they are interdependent. When we say they are interdependent, meaning to say each firm's policy will affect the rivals, which means my company's policies will be affected by my rivals, and whatever my rivals do in the market will be affecting me. So unlike monopoly, we all know that monopoly is a single seller in the market. No one can actually influence them unless the government is making some sort of new regulations or new policies against them. And then if you look at monopolistic market, for example, I quote Roti Canai, or maybe some of the Chinese restaurant, okay, Mama, okay. This kind of firms, they have low interdependent relationship. Because why? The shops in Subang, no matter what they charge, it wouldn't really affect the shops in maybe Kota Kemuning or Klang or whatever. However, oligopoly firms, they are highly interdependent for the reason where their products is homogeneous to some extent and differentiated to some extent. Homogeneous to some extent as in their product, they are offering similar services, just like telco services. They are just offering you ability to connect to the internet, the ability to access to data, the ability to communicate with friends, okay, made a call and all those things. But then they are differentiated in terms of their total packages, like how many gig they provide you, what is the price they charge, what is their brand name. So they are basically close substitute to each other, okay, to some extent. And this is why one firm's policy will affect another firm's decision, okay? Now, and because of this interdependency, I'd like you to jot down where it leads to something called price rigidity. Because firms' policies are affecting each other, so oligopoly market, they are having another very important features, we call it price rigidity. Price rigidity meaning to say, if you compare with other market structure like perfect competitions or maybe monopoly or maybe monopolistic, oligopoly market is having relatively the most stable prices among all market structure. And firms in oligopoly, they were usually like trying to maintain price, meaning that they will try to avoid price competition. And why is it so? What makes oligopoly market having price rigidity? We will be discussing about it later. And next, if you look at what is meant by duopoly, meaning that the market is basically concentrated in the hand of two big company like Visa and Master, Airbus and Boeing. So they are slightly differentiated, but overall the core services offered is like the same. Okay, now let me do a short summary. Yeah. Okay. First of all, just now I mentioned about price rigidity, right? Now, the main reason for price rigidity is because firms choose not to compete with price, which means firms in oligopoly market, they will try to avoid price competition. And what is the explanation behind? We can break it down to two things, okay? First of all, we can have collusive oligopoly. Which means oligopoly firms, they are colluding. And we also have non-collusive oligopoly. Which means firms are not cooperating, not collaborating, not working together. Now, under collusive oligopoly, we will mainly focus on the discussion of cartel. Okay, under non-collusive oligopoly, there are two theories explaining their behavior. First one, we call it the king demand curve. Second one, we call it the game theory. I think we are quite familiar with game theory. Perhaps we heard about it, or maybe like we usually just implement it when we are playing games or whatever. Okay, so I go back to my notes. Now let's look at what is meant by collusive oligopoly cartel. Okay, now cartel is a formal agreement, okay, between a groups of firms that working together or collaborate, okay? So they are not like combining, they are not merging, it's just that individual firms, they sign an agreement and then to agree on certain terms and conditions. So now they say cartel is formed when a group of oligopolistic firms collude. So basically they will sign an agreement, and what they do is trying to restrict competition, okay, so that collectively they can maximize their own benefit. Okay, now what they do after they collude, they will try to fix prices, okay, and then they will restrict output, meaning that individual firms will be assigned quota. And then they will engage in anti-competitive practice. For example, they will like collectively, they are charging these prices, and then collectively they are setting the quota, and collectively they are working together instead of competing to each other. And they will use this kind of method to prevent new entrants from joining the market as well, okay? Of course, when there's any forms of collaborations, there must be some conditions needed to be satisfied in order for the collaborations to be successful. First of all, an agreement has to be reached. So when cartel is formed, basically an agreement is signed, okay? Secondly, after you sign the agreement, you must make sure that cheating can be prevented. So cheating can be prevented, meaning to say like firms will adhere, participating firms will adhere to the terms and conditions set, and then participating firms will adhere like to the quota assigned. So for example, I am like firm A, and then I have joined a cartel, and then in this cartel, we agreed that to set the price at $12. This is my selling price. But every individual firms are assigned different quota. And the quota is assigned depending on the scale of the company and depending on the like how big scale, basically size of the company, okay? So for example, I got a quota. Every month, I am allowed to produce 5,000 units. Okay, so what happened next is, if I adhere to this contract, I will keep my sales and output at 5,000 units every month. However, if I am to cheat, I will sell more than the quota I got at the market price set to grab extra abnormal profit. So that is what we call like cheating. So we need to make sure that cheating can be prevented, okay, can be prohibited, okay? Now, then they say, if all the members in the cartel cheat, the market price will fall quickly, okay? This is simple, as in if I break my, if I like not adhere, not following the terms and conditions set, and then I am selling extra, and other members also selling extra, so the market supply of the particular product will rise. So based on the market forces interaction, when market supply rises, definitely the price will fall. And next, potential competition must be restricted, which means we must like have barriers of entry and exit, or we must elevate the barriers of entry and exit collectively to prevent new firms from joining the market. So I always ask, like in class, I always ask students, now you are playing two different games. First one is mahjong. Okay, if you know, like if you happen to know, there are 3 players mahjongs and 4 players mahjong. Okay, another one is blackjack. Under which game collusion is more likely to be formed and easier to be formed, and also like more successful in terms of their implementation? So what is your thought? Mahjong, 3-4 players, blackjack, like can be up to 10 or 15 players, okay? So which one is easier to form a cartel or collusion, and which collusion is likely to be more successful, okay? So which is your choice? Okay, the answer is mahjong. First of all, mahjong, the most you can get 3 to 4 players only. Therefore, it is easier for you to form an agreement between members, because it's only either 3 members or 4 members. So you just need to form a cartel, like if it is a 3 players mahjong, cartel of 2. 4 players mahjong, cartel of 3. Then you are going against the particular people. And because mahjong, the maximum amount of player is only 4, the barriers of entry is high, as in none of the mahjong game can allow the 5th player. So that you will stick to 4 players. So therefore, like when the game started, when 3 of you have formed the agreement, as long as none of you break the agreement, games can continue. Unlike blackjack, blackjack, like initially maybe it started with 6 players, and then you manage to form agreement between like 5 of you against the banker, okay? However, after an agreement is reached, or you all started playing games and so on, but the 7, 8, 9, 10 players started to come in because the barriers of entry is very low for blackjack. So you can accommodate up to 15 players. So in this case, after 3 of you or 4, 5 of you fix an agreement, or you all are following it, but then new player come in. The new player come in, either you negotiate with the new player again, a waste of time, or the new player, they don't know where the collusion is happening, and then they will disrupt the entire game. Okay, so this is what happened. Therefore, in order for a cartel to be very successful, potential competition must be restricted. Okay. However, forming a cartel within a country is illegal. So formal collusion within a country is basically illegal because it is going against consumers' interests. In every country, government has the responsibility to protect consumers against exploitative behavior of firms. So to some extent, government has the responsibility to protect consumers and to keep the interests of consumers high, okay? So now, basically, cartel cannot be formed, okay, within the country, but in the reality, we have international cartel, with OPEC being the most famous and popular cartel ever. So, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, which consists of like a few major oil producers, which include Saudi Arabia, okay, Venezuela, and so on, some Middle East country. And this international cartel own like almost half of the world, they are producing more than half of the world output, So now, and this international cartel, they set quota for individual countries. Every members, they have their own quota, how many barrels of oil that they can produce every day, okay? And then they are trying to influence the supply of oil in order to push the oil price higher in the world market. However, last time, OPEC is having a very strong influence over the world supply of oil and also the world price of oil. However, now, recently, with US being able to produce oil with fracking technology, and having Russia on another corner, so OPEC is getting less and less influential. But still, we cannot ignore the significance of OPEC because they still own like up to 50% of the world oil supply. Okay, so that is like the international cartel. And what are the others international cartel? Please go and search it out and get another example for yourself to deepen your understanding. Okay, next, as we mentioned just now, cartel is a way how oligopolistic firms collude. They collaborate, they work together. But then, since cartel is prohibited within the country, then what can happen in the country? So, if a formal agreement cannot be signed, then we go for informal collusion, okay? The informal collusion, we call it passive collusion, or in other words, we can also call it price leadership, okay? Price leadership involved whereby firms are not like signing any formal agreement, but then for price leadership, they have assigned one market leader Usually the market leader is the one having the biggest market share, and then the rest agreed to follow. But then the agreement might be wing their eyes or whatever, but then they cannot sign any formal one, because if they sign any formal agreement, they can be sued by the government, okay? And government can even withdraw their license, because this is anti-competitive behavior, which is not allowed within the country, again, within the country. So after they assign a market leader, once the market leader change their price, the followers, the rest of the small firms, they will get the signal, and then they will start changing their price as well. This is what happened usually in the country. And this is also like why you will see in most of the oligopolistic market, prices between firms can be very similar. This is one of the biggest reason, okay? So that is what we call tacit collusion. And by now we have done for the first part, which is the collusive oligopoly, cartel, and if not, we call it tacit collusion. And again, like just to remind you, when you're explaining like cartel or tacit collusion or collusive oligopoly, of course, other than defining them, you must mention what are the conditions needed. Just like what are the conditions that I explained to you. Oh, you can prevent players from cheating, and then you need to limit the entrance of new firms. Okay, so this is the first part for oligopoly. Yeah? Talking about their features, talking about how they work together, talking about how firms can like just act collectively in order to maximize the benefits between of all of them. Okay, so for now, I will just stop for a while, because this is the first part of oligopoly, and later on we will continue with the second part of oligopoly, which is the non-collusive oligopoly. See ya.